Hi, my name is Michael Vano. I'm a consultant at Bootcamp DEV6, and I'm here to talk about just a very brief overview of Flutter and all the various things you'll need to get a mobile application started. So, what is Flutter? Flutter is Google's framework for creating native mobile applications. They wrote this with the idea that you just write the code once and it can easily be deployed to both iOS and Android. And not only that, it can have a consistent look and feel for both iOS and Android, which from what I read and what I hear is a very important thing for some companies. And sometimes there's some frustration between iOS and Android, and sometimes they have different look and feel depending on which device you're programming for. Another thing is that it uses Dart 2, which is programming language that Google has just been developing themselves. And within Flutter, they consider everything a widget. So from structural to layout to styling to text, everything is just pretty much considered a widget in here, which we'll be going into a bit later on. And they do have a framework that you can use, but it is totally optional. You don't have to use it. You can kind of create your own framework. But with the framework, it's just a bit easier to kind of get started right away, and you have a lot of things already set up, kind of like a header and a body, and a lot of kind of under the hood kind of things, kind of configuration type stuff, which the framework will already have set up. But if you decide not to use it, then you just kind of have to set up things yourself in that manner. And another cool thing is that it doesn't use native elements in either iOS or Android. They actually kind of create their own canvas on top of everything, and draw their own, or I guess render their own elements on top of it, and that's what creates the layouts for it. And because they are doing that, they can optimize it a lot better and get a much faster and smoother frame rate from your native application. And then for the stylings, you can either use material, so like material design. Those of you using maybe Angular might be familiar with it. It has this very kind of flat styles. And there's also Cupertino available, which is more the iOS styling, kind of the white to gray gradients and those kinds of things. So you can choose either one of the stylings, or you can just decide not to use either of them and just kind of create your own styles. And it has been it's been stable, version 1, ever since December 4th, so that means they're making pretty good progress, and it's no longer in beta testing. So moving on here. So with Dart, it is a very extremely typed language. It is similar to other typed languages, kind of similar to Java in a way. They tend to declare the types and property names beforehand. So as you can see here, they have the declaration of an integer declared before the variable name. But if you look at the structure here, it's very similar to other class-oriented type programming languages. And the structures in terms of the layout, it's very similar to React. Flutter even got inspiration from React in terms of how to build the framework and the structures and the layouts. So with widgets, essentially everything in Flutter, essentially the building blocks of Flutter. So they're used to create the layouts, how it's laid out, even the stylings. So whether something is a certain width, a certain height, a certain color, even if it's rounded. And utilizing these widgets, it's how Google has been able to optimize a native application, because these widgets essentially kind of maintain themselves in a way. So there are both stateless and stateful widgets. And oops, sorry, let's just go back here. So the way it works is each widget will manage itself in a way that only if something is changed will that one widget change. We don't need to draw everything else around it. We don't need to draw the direct parent of the element. It's self-contained. It knows, hey, this value has changed. I'm just going to change this one piece of value, and it'll only do that. So it only listens to, or I guess reacts to whatever changes and updates that one individual widget without having to repaint the entire application. And there are various types of widgets. So there is structural, so things that kind of build your application and your layout. Styles, which apply styles that are inspired by HTML, CSS. So they have things like row, container elements. They use like rows, columns, images, text, and they also have gestures where it picks up any kind of like tap, double tap, long press, and we'll be getting into these a bit later on as well. And I mentioned before, stateful and stateless widgets. So stateful ones are something where the widget is expecting a value to change within it, whereas stateless is more for just kind of like layout, and it's going to be pretty much static and not changing at all in its lifespan. So going on into layouts here. So the layouts, essentially what it says, it's laying out your application here. If you are familiar with CSS Flex, these will look very reminiscent of that. They got the inspiration for how to structure these things based off of that. So as you can see here, we have a column. So the column arranges these elements stacked on top of each other in a column. And if you look at the enumerations here, so you have main axis alignment, cross axis alignment. This concept is very similar to CSS Flex, where they space evenly, so they're all spaced evenly between each other, and the cross axis alignment is centered, so it's centered along this cross axis here, and the direction is just going down. And then with the rows, you can see that it's lined up. These elements here are lined up 1, 2, 3 in a row here. So it very much feels like a flex box within HTML and CSS. So if you're familiar with that, these will kind of be reminiscent of this for you. So in terms of interactivity, there are many interactions built into the gesture detector widget. There's a lot of things with the gesture detector that you can utilize, and depending on which one is triggered, you can set a function or some sort of reaction to that particular interaction that the user does. So in this particular case here, you have the gesture detector here, and you can see here, we'll get into this into the demo a bit later on, but you can kind of quickly see here, you got like on tap, you got long press, you got horizontal drag, which is kind of like a swipe, and a vertical drag, a double type. So those kinds of things you can hook up into, and it will create those type of interactivity you need. So in terms of assets and images, you can load any images you want, and fonts. They must be declared in the pubspec YAML. Otherwise, it's not going to know to find them, nor is it going to know to kind of bring them into the application. Pretty much because it has to pre-compile all these assets, it has to know where to find these things. And then you can also set the dimensions on how it fills the box. So as you can see here, we have an image. So this is a widget here, an image asset, and this is the reference to the image here. You got the width and the height, and the way it fills it, the way it fits inside the box is that it pretty much takes up the entire space within the box. So with navigation and routing, there's a lot of different ways with Flutter that you can go about navigating routing. So the first one we're going to look at here is the very simple, just kind of push and pop functionality. So the idea here is that you push a page into the view, and then you can pop it out once you're done. So it's kind of like going into one place, and once you're done, you'll go back to it. Once again, we'll see this in the demo later on. And it, by default, using the framework, it creates a very kind of typical transition between mobile applications where it kind of slides and flips into it, and then when you hit pop, or when you pop it out, it'll kind of go back outside of the view. And you pretty much essentially, in this way, you pass in the widget that you want to display when you push it. So as you can see here, you got navigator push, and then you have a material page route, and you pass in second route, which here, as you can see, is a whole kind of scaffolding. Once again, you got the bar at the top, you got setter, you got a button in the middle, and when you click on that, you pop it. So essentially, this is the state that it's in right now. You hit pop, and it'll go back to this page here. Once again, we will see all this in action in the demo. Another way to go about it is similar to kind of URL or HTML routes. So you can say that, okay, I want this particular route here. When you click on it, or kind of when you set it, it'll go to the home screen. So if you look back at the example here, so instead of passing in a route here, we pass in a string that says, okay, this string is going to be hit, so it means load up the home screen. So this way is very akin to kind of HTML routes, and this is a good way if you want to kind of go to a page directly without having to maybe, kind of keep pushing through certain elements just to get there. So this is another good way to deal with navigation and routing in your application. And another thing too is, you want to pass data back. So maybe you push a view into the application and you want a response back. So in this kind of case, we have a navigator where we push a selection screen. So in the selection screen, we have two options here where it's just like yes or no. So depending on which one you click, it'll come back into the original page and will display the result. In this case, it'll kind of show a little snack bar, so it's kind of like a little toast at the bottom. And the idea here is that it works similar to JavaScript promises, where it's just waiting on a result that gets passed into it. And the way you pass it is using the navigator utility here. You pass it in through the second argument here, and the data will be returned here as a result. And then as you can see here, the result will then just be displayed as text within the snack bar. And another way also is, rather than getting the data back, you can pass data into a page that you're going towards. So with here, when we push a screen into the view, we pass in a list of tasks. We pass in a single task from a list of tasks here. So when you push it into here, the detail screen will accept it. And then from here, you can see that it builds the scaffold based off of the task title here, as well as the description. So this is one way to get data into another page. Now, connecting with APIs. So this is a fun little thing where you actually have to have the HTTP package declared in your dependencies. So once again, that is found in the pubspec YAML. And the future type, as you can see here, oh, my mistake. No, here we go. The future here, this works very much like a promise in JavaScript, where it is, making a request and it's waiting for a response back. So as you can see here, you have an await, so you're waiting for this URL to be hit, and once it is done and resolved, then the response, you can check what it is, and then you can do your functions on the data returned. So now we will be going into the live demo, and you will see all these things in action. All right, so here we are with the demos. So first things first, layouts. So with the Flutter application here, just a quick rundown of the code. So the void main is the main function that you want to run the app, and as you can see here, my app refers to this class here, and it digs a bit deeper, so it will build a widget returning a new material app, which is the kind of material framework that is used. So you got the title and the theme data, which you can choose, material themes you got, and the home page is your home page here. And as you can see here, it keeps digging further down, so this is a stateful widget. And it creates the initial home page state, which, as you can see here, has the entire scaffolding. So the scaffold is composed of an app bar, this part here, and the body, the rest of it here. And you can even choose to disregard the app bar and have that. Oh, there you go. Sometimes the hot loading does not always work, so you gotta click here, and as you can see, because I no longer wanted the app bar here, it just pretty much takes up the whole space. So as I mentioned before going through the slides, the framework is purely optional. So getting that back in, once again, hot reloading. Let's close that there. And we're just going to go through the layout here. So as you can see, the body is pretty much a row of columns. So you got a row. So you got a row like this here, and you got columns 1, 2, 3. So you got the first column here. This highlighted area refers to this part here. So that's one column going 1, 2, 3, top to bottom. So the top to bottom, as you can see, refers to this vertical direction going down, top to bottom. The second highlighted section here is 4, 5, 6. As you can see again, it goes from top to bottom. But you'll notice in the last one here, the third column, this one, we set the vertical direction to go up. So it goes from 7, 8, 9, even though it's listed in this order. And as you'll see, the columns, so it's listed 1, 2, 3, so it's stacked on top of each other. Now, if we wanted to reorientate this, so say we wanted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We just essentially stack this, make this a column, and then we want to reorientate these to be rows. Oops, caps lock on there. And then vertical direction no longer applies. Oops. Okay, we just click the button here and hot reload it, and as you can see, everything has now been organized in a left to right, top down order. So now the entire body here is one big column with 3 rows stacked on top of each other. And you got the text in here in the row ordered in left to right. And these things do get generated in the order that they're rendered. So if I move this down here, the one will now be at the end. So that's layouts, and these here, you can ignore that little issue there. So here we can even change it. So one cool thing about Dart is because it's very strictly typed, all these properties are kind of enumerated. So it's very easy to kind of play around and see what each kind of attribute does. So you can say, okay, the main axis alignment start. Okay, so how does that look? Okay, so okay, everything starts at the top. Okay, well, let's see what other options we got here. So this is really nice with the enumeration that they've done with Flutter here. And as I mentioned before, going through the slides, they kind of follow suit the conventions of CSS Flex. So as you can see here, everything has been spaced evenly. And then, you know, if you're familiar with Flex, you recognize these values. You got space between. So this one will just kind of space everything between, starting with this at the top and then this at the end, and everything else will be nicely organized in between them. Okay. And the same can go here as well. So main axis alignment, you can have them as start, and there is also cross-axis alignment as well. And if you cannot tell, if you're curious, the IDE that I'm actually using is in IDEA from IntelliJ, and it actually does have a Flutter plugin that you can download, and it is extremely helpful when kind of playing around with Dart and Flutter in here. Let's just ignore that. Okay, so as you can see here, everything's now all the way to the left. The cross-axis, well, you can't really see it because they're all the same height, but the cross-axis would kind of align these things differently. Okay, so let's just get these back to a nicely laid out order here. Oops. Yeah. Okay. And let's just basically remove this one here. So you can kind of see how you'll arrange your layouts within Flutter. So in this demo here, we'll be looking at the gesture detector, just to listen in all the various gesture detections that you can have here. So as you see here, we got just a very simple layout using the scaffold, app bar. We've got a little count incrementer, which kind of demonstrates a bit of the different interactions. And what I've done here is on this bottom little button here, has all the various kind of interactions you can have on it. So as you can see here, you'll watch the logs down here. So when I tap on it, you'll see that it registers a tap. Now if I press long on it, it's long pressed. Same thing with horizontal drag and vertical drag, as well as double tap. So as you can see, you have all these various things you can have on a single element, and depending on what you do with it, you can change whatever interaction you have. And same thing here with this. This is an example of the stateful and stateless widget. So the stateless widget essentially is just the entire application, or I guess the whole body here. Not much changing. You can see the icon buttons, these kind of text and everything, they're just all static. But then as you dig deeper here into the counter, see the counter is a stateful widget. So this is going to actually be something that changes. So as you can see here, it creates a new state counter, which this changes, and as it increments, it decreases the number. And we can change that here, so it will increase instead. As you can see, it starts to increment. So in this demo here, this will be all the routing demos going on here. So as you can see, we have the first route set up here. That will be the home that will be generated first. And within the code, you can see here that we have a raise button that will go to the next page that refers to here. And then when you push it, it will go to the second route, which is here. Once again, it is a scaffold with an app bar as the next page, and on that page we will see two elements, two buttons that we can click on, one to go back to the home page and the other to keep going on to another one. The third route as displayed here, and on this page we will see once again the scaffold with an app bar and a raise button that all you can do is just go back to the second page. So from here, the first route, here's the little simulator here. Click on go next page. Now this one here is the second route. So you got the title here, the next page. You got the body with the column, everything centered. You got two buttons. This one, go back home, and the raise button here to go to the next page. So you go to the next page, once again, it'll push the third route, the third widget into view with just a single button. All you can do is go back. Now when you start using push and pop, you'll notice that they do have these arrows automatically appended to the top. You can just click and it works like a back button inside of a URL. Just very typical standard things within mobile applications. So this is the first routing example that we had where it's just simple push and pop. So we're just going to move on to and have a look at the next type where you actually have the routes defined. So as you can see here, I got the code set up. Just do a hot, just restart everything here. So with this type of routing, using route names instead, you have access to any of the widgets from the home screen. So you could go either to the second or the third. If you recall in the one just we looked at now, you can only get to the third page from the second screen. With this one, you can get to the third screen from the first screen as well, or the second screen. So with this kind of setup, it's something where you want to access a widget, maybe from various different locations within your application. This type of routing will be ideal for that kind of scenario. So here's the main application, and here's the routes set up in the material application. And we have the scaffold with this is the first screen. You have go to second and go to third here. And then the second screen essentially just has a button that'll go back. Third screen has another one that will go back. So if we go to second screen, you can go back. And then from the first screen, you can go to the third screen, you can go back as well. So sorry about that. I mentioned that the second screen did have it. It did not, but we can add that quickly here. So you just add a column. Move this into here. Just doing some alignment. Oops, wrong one. Should be cross-axis alignment. So if we do this, so it should start with the second stream. Oops, center is not defined. Oops, I had it twice there. It's my mistake. So I'll reload that. So now when you go to the second screen, it should be the same, but this allows us to add a second button that when pressed, let's grab this here, we can say go to the third page, and inside the button go to the third page. Alright, now as you can see, it's there. So now we can get to the third page from the first screen or second screen. So this kind of routing is nice for this kind of setup where everything is not just linear. You kind of want a certain widget or a view to be accessible through various means. and not just one single path or workflow. So in the last example here for routing, this is going to be actually a little bit of combination of both. So both the API and the routing. So excuse all the commented out code here. Been playing around a lot with it. So this here is a list that is generated, and each one, every time you click on it, will hit an API and get the data back and display it. So in here we have a post list screen. So if we go into here, it just has a list view, which is pretty much an array, and I can set how many items I want in it. It'll just go through it, and page route will build this detail screen. So once you click on one of these items here, it'll display a screen. Once again, a future, which is a post. It's a promise waiting for the API to get data back. And once it does, the future builder, once it's done the promise, it will build this page here and set it up. Another interesting thing to take note is it can, depending on the results of the promise, you can either show the data or show an error. What happens here is while the promise is getting resolved until it's completed, you can return a default view, which essentially just shows that it's loading, and you have this circle progress indicator. Alright, so here in the last example for the routing, we're going to combine the demo for the API as well, part of this here. So in this route, in this example, we show a list of posts that can be seen. So in here, once again, we have the scaffold, the app bar up here, and we have a list screen, a widget. And in here, we have the widget that will build a list with 55 items. You got the post number and we got the title at the top, and when you, the list tile is essentially this here, so view post and number, and then on tap it will navigate to a page, post details screen, with a post, which is a fetch post here, which is a future, as I mentioned before, kind of like a promise. So we're waiting for data back from the API request, and as you can see here, this is what happens. So it'll wait for the response, just wait for it async, HTTP. This is a public URL just to test API requests from. Convert the number to a string, just print some data, and once you get the response, you got 200, then we can return the return the response body as a JSON object. Otherwise, it'll throw an exception. So when we click on here, actually quickly back into the code here. So on the screen, you'll notice you have a future builder, which this is essentially, once the promise has been resolved, build this widget, and you tell it what, pretty much which promise you're waiting for. And then in here, the builder, once it's done, you got the snapshot of what's being completed. And then when you check it and it has data in it, you will return a scaffold widget with the, as you're familiar with now, probably, the app bar here at the title, which will just take the title of here and kind of throw it up here. And the body you get back will be thrown into the middle of the body area and just kind of displayed. Otherwise, it'll just throw an error if you get error back. And the cool thing is with the future builder is if neither of these conditions are met, it'll actually return a scaffold widget. You can set this however you want, but it will be a kind of a waiting or a loading screen, waiting until the promise is made and resolved. And in this one, we have a circular progress indicator, just part of the material design framework. So when we click on here, you'll notice it quickly, the circular indicator. So let me click on it. We have it there quickly, and as you can see, the data, we get a title back, we get bodies. So if we go back, we go to a different item in the list here. Once again, we'll see the circular indicator and the data they get back. So this is another example of kind of how you can pass data into the route and then have it render in. In this particular case, we're actually passing in a future or a promise, if you want to think of it through JavaScript terminology. And then once that promise is resolved from the API, we throw the data into a future builder here and render it out in here. So that was Flutter Bootcamp overview, just a very quick general idea of what you can do with Flutter. Thanks for watching.